Officers, I know most of your qualification is on this big giant target. Today we get reminded that you better have small target capability. Hi everyone, welcome to today's badge cam lesson here at Active Self Protection. Every day we post a real life use of force caught on camera so that my and your training and practice can be more research informed. I am your host, John Correa.
I'm your co-host, Mike Williver. Today's video comes to us from Santa Ana, California.
Download the ASP Unlimited app for all the content you love from Active Self Protection and more with no interference from YouTube. No ads, no age gates, exclusive videos, seminars, classes, and more on iOS, Android, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. Hit the link in the description or download ASP Unlimited from your app store today.
Officers have been called here to a domestic in progress. The call says that a man here is having a mental crisis, has stabbed at least one family member in the house, and is holding a female at knife point. That's what officers have. Let's listen in. We have two badge cams.
Hey! Leg over, you're gonna be shot. Leg over, you're gonna be shot.
He already got a knife.
Leg over.
If he did himself, he wants to kill himself.
Leg over. Leg over.
Let me go.
Leg over.
Henry, please.
Leg over.
No, you gotta use the other one, please.
Leg go, you're gonna get shot.
Henry.
All right. 323 Alpha, Lemby 998. We're gonna have one down. Still, the knife still in his hand.
Hey, let go.
Leg over, you're gonna be shot. Leg over, you're gonna be shot.
He already got a knife.
Leg over.
If he did himself, he wants to
Let go of her.
Leg over. Leg over.
All right, we have the
Leg
male
over.
actively holding
Leg
on to
over.
the
No,
elderly
you gotta use the
female.
other one, please.
Leg go, you're gonna get shot.
She's not complying with command. Come over here.
Let me get
No,
my
come over here.
Here's a picture of the knife. There was some video in the original that I've linked in the description to them trying to render first aid to him. That was not effective, obviously. He died at the scene, and you can read all about it in the news stories that I've linked. I mean, honest question for all of us. At this distance is not a far shot. We're talking about over the car hood, so maybe 12 or 13 feet. Could you make a shot on something as small as an eyeball? That's, I think, a higher skill than most people think, Mike.
Yeah, and honestly, I want you to have that confidence that you can do that before the moment of truth.
Not just the confidence, the competence. Obviously, Mike, domestics are probably the most dangerous event that officers are going to go to, the one that we know is going to go bad. So one of the things I think is important for officers who are dispatched to a domestic is to downregulate your blood pressure, downregulate your breathing, your heart rate, so that you can show up and make good decisions, and it's clear these officers did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to on your way to a call like this, to think to yourself, what am I going to do when I get there? Start thinking ahead. Consider things like, where's my cover going to be? And use that combat breathing if you're a little amped up to regulate your sort of your arousal level, so that when you get there, you are calm as can possibly be, because calm is both contagious and a superpower.
And for the private citizens, I want to recognize these officers did an incredible job, I think, and showed up as fast as they possibly could. And yet, how much time had to pass? How many injuries, a death had to happen? And so I'm not saying, don't call the cops. I'm saying I'm very grateful that officers responded here. But I think that sometimes you got to go, nope, I've got to take care of this first because lives are on the line.
Yeah, and if you don't have the training, I mean, look, if you're watching this channel, odds are you've given this sort of thing some thought, especially if you're staying after the original video and listening to us two talk about breaking down the incident. So, think about this stuff in advance. If there's someone in your life who you know is maybe a problem, get the training you need. Arm yourself if necessary so you don't have to wait for the cops to show up. The cops will take minutes at least to get there.
I also love here, our first officer shows up, 2 hands on the gun up, light on the perp. And I have a hard time telling here, Mike, if this is the cruiser light or if this is a pistol mounted light. I'm not 100% positive, but at any rate, the officer used the light available to him very, very well. And I think it's a great argument. This is why I like a pistol mounted light, because if the perp moves or if things change in here, you've got all this varied lighting conditions, and having a bright light on your pistol for a police officer is very useful.
I'm genuinely jealous of modern day law enforcement officers, especially marked units. You know, they got a million lights on them. You got your takedown lights, your high beams, your spotlights. Use all the light you can. The photonic barrier is a real thing. And if you're able to blind the suspect, that makes it harder for him or her to see you, gives you all the advantage in the world. But with that said, usually you're not going to be able to get your cruiser lights on your bad guy. It's going to be inside or around back or whatever. So a really quality gun-mounted light with plenty of all the candela and plenty of throw is critical. It's one of the most important pieces of equipment you can possibly have.
Yeah, when does the light on your pistol or in your pocket have too much candela? When it sets things on fire or it has recoil is when it has too many of those. I think we've proven that again and again. I also love here, our officer shows up, he sees what's going, and he gets himself to a good place where he's not personally at risk. And now they stopped right here. This is obviously the police department zoomed in to see, yes, he does have a knife in his hand. I think that's important. Obviously, the officer doesn't see it from that perspective. The badge cam is on the middle of his chest, and he is seeing it from the perspective of his Mark I Mod 0 eyeballs. But he's recognizing, wait a minute, this guy is a deadly threat. I think that he gave this guy every chance, Mike, but maybe too much chance with them showing up.
Yeah, you can't go slowly fast enough. Is that right? The idea here is you don't have a lot of time to mess around and hope. We saw a video not long ago out of LA, I believe, where there was a bad guy, you know, over a guy who was bleeding out. And John and I lamented the fact that they took so long to shoot that guy because you got a victim. You don't know if this woman is bleeding, if she's injured. You have no idea. And right now he's threatening her life. It would take him half a second. In fact, if he started that motion to slash your throat or to stab her in the carotid artery or the femoral artery, even if you shot him, you might not be able to stop that. So speed and accuracy really are key here. You don't want to wait around. Right now you're gambling. If you don't act quickly, you're gambling with the victim's life.
I also want to note here, our officer gets into a great spot. He's using an iron-sighted pistol, and that's wonderful, okay? That works just fine. But watch here, and I want to pay attention to the fact that when we stop the action here, I want to note that on these small shots, and a face shot is a small shot, that you want to go when you have time to go. When you know, okay, I've got to make that shot, don't waste time. Because if you look and see exactly where he's aimed here, let's just say he's aimed in the middle of his face, that he's aiming right here kind of between the eyes. That's when you see that X there. But if you don't go when you have that, in other words, if it takes you too long because you're not confident enough in your grip, your sights, and your trigger, then he can move very, very quickly. And when he does, things can go south in a hurry. So let's watch and see what happens here over literally less than a second. This is about 0.9 seconds that he turns in that same point of aim, at least from the perspective of the badge cam, okay? I'm not saying that that's the same thing that the officer would see with his eyes, but I wanted to note for that can change quickly. So when you make that decision, you've got to have the sights there, your grip there, the trigger there, Mike, in order to make it happen with enough rapidity.
Additionally, you have to have confidence in your marksmanship. This is the shot of shots, right? You can't miss this shot for a bunch of reasons. Not only because you don't want to hit the victim, but also because if you miss, it might be his go signal. Okay, now it's time to start stabbing grandma in the throat. Additionally, I want you confident in your equipment. I want you to know, yeah, I got a round in the chamber. This is not going to go click when it needs to go bang. Yeah, all my equipment works. I checked it. I'm confident. I don't have to think about it. I'm not worried about it. Right now, all I have to worry about is this shooting solution and how do I get around on this guy as quickly as possible and end this threat, because like I said, any moment he decides to start slashing her, he can. And you know, if you wait too long, you got problems.
And listen, this is clearly life and death stuff. So officers, if you're in a department, and I know some do and some don't, but if you're in a department where your roll call is somewhere where you get a small range at your duty station, at your call center, so then that way you can just warm up with a few rounds, man, take advantage of that. Don't get out on the street without that warm up, and check your equipment, make sure everything is in order, and lube your gun. Make sure that you know that that gun is in a good condition, that you're lubing it regularly, that you know exactly where it hits to point of aim, because lives are on the line and you don't want to miss. And thank God this officer had that level of skill, moved into a place where from here about 5 yards or so, he was able to hit a very small target. And of course that was, I mean, it was incredibly effective. And so we're talking about shutting the electrical system off here. That face shot is highly, highly effective, did its task. Let's talk a little bit about the second officer here as she comes on screen, Mike. And I think that she actually did a really good job. Before we do that, let's make sure that we remember the fact that our first officer was excellent on the radios too. Our second officer, she shows up. I'm gonna give her just a little bit of grief here because she's got the brick in her hand. And our other officer is using his lapel mic so he can put 2 hands on the gun. She was using 1 hand because of the brick mic, and you know we had to mention it.
Yeah, so again, I'm going to say if your agency, and most do in the United States anyway, if your radio, probably a Motorola or a Kenwood, is equipped with an emergency button and you've got to get in there and handle this problem right now, utilize the emergency button. It'll just get people there quickly without you having to get on the radio. If you have a second, right, to be like, he's got a knife, we're moving in, or whatever you're going to say, that's fine. If you have a handheld radio and you don't have a pork chop mic or a surveillance kit where you can use that radio without really occupying your non-dominant hand, please avail yourself of that. This is an LAPD thing. I don't know why, but they have this thing about picking up their radios and you know, the radio with no lapel mic and putting it to their mouth. Look, if it's time to rock and roll all of a sudden, you're gonna have a problem because you're gonna have a radio in your hand when you should have a gun in your hand.
Yeah, I do think she did a really good job here though of positioning herself. Yes, she's on the radio and okay, so she's like, he's on lethal cover. I'm on the radio getting other units here and figuring out what to do. That's a great division of labor. I'm sure they figured that out ahead of time. But what I really love here, Mike, is that A, she got behind cover. B, she got a great L-shaped ambush. And C, she got out of the way of the light so that we can see what's going on. Not we, you and I here on the badge cam, but she and the other officers. So I think from a tactical perspective, she did really well here.
Yeah, I will say this, both of these officers used the car really well, right, as an obstacle in between them and the bad guys. So they didn't have to worry so much about their own personal safety. They can focus on handling this threat. Here's a rule of thumb. If you are looking at a bad guy, it's a nighttime situation, or you're indoors and it's dark, if your shadow is on the problem, then you need to move if you possibly can, unless you have to leave cover to do it. You need to move and get out of the way because that light, that photonic barrier is helping you, actively helping you, in as much as the suspect has difficulty seeing you, and that can help you, give you a couple more seconds to do what you got to do.
And I also love here that once that shot breaks, okay, they had a very good division of labor here. He's like, I'm on the gun. Now, why is he on the gun? Maybe they determined he's a better shot. He's more experienced at that. Okay, fine. I'm on radios. You're on gun. Great. Once that shot breaks and that guy, you know, goes and very briefly regrets his life choices, notice here that our officer puts her gun away in the holster. So before she goes and puts hands on this lady and gets her out of the way, she holsters up her gun so that she's not grabbing somebody with a gun in her hand. And I think she should be commended for that. So I would say she did a darn good job here, Mike.
I've seen a few instances, including that last video that I referenced earlier in LA, where the backup shows up to go and deal with a victim and all that sort of thing. And they're going in there sort of like Starsky and Hutch, Charlie's Angels style, with their gun still out. The threat has clearly been neutralized. Look, if you see this freeze grab we have here, this guy on his back, he's been shot in the head. He's no longer a threat. I mean, you can't guarantee that for a fact, but you got to get this lady out of there. Holstering up is the proper thing to do. Look, at the end of the day, these two did a fantastic job. This is a really difficult call to deal with, and they have to make decisions in a split second, and those decisions could determine whether or not this poor woman lives or dies. And at the end of the day, these officers did a fantastic job covering their ass.